Okay, cool. So Jason, I am so excited to hear your story. I kind of know a little bit of, just bits and pieces of what you've shared with me, but tell me a little bit just about you, what you do, just a little bit of background there.
Okay. I am from Utah, mostly. I used to live in Kansas for a bit. That's where my dad was from. But after a while there, we moved back to Utah, where my mom was from, and been here since. I guess I've been a police officer for almost 16 years. Now I do our special victims unit investigations and internet crimes against children task force. But it's been a good career. I've done SWAT, crash reconstruction, you name it. Got an awesome family. I recently just barely got married, like a couple months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, remarried, I guess. But together we have 6 kiddos.
Awesome.
Ranging from almost 4 years old to almost 17 years old. So
wow, that's
yeah,
so cool.
Quick me in a nutshell.
Awesome. Well, so when I want to hear a little bit about like your growing up. Were you raised in the church? What was kind of your experience growing up? When was your first kind of exposure to the church? All of that.
Right. Yeah, I was raised in church. My dad was a convert when he lived in Kansas, but my mom, they have a whole long history of church membership. So yeah, I grew up in the church. We went to church, sort of the Sunday Utah thing, I guess. The young men's, Boy Scouts, all that stuff. Had a lot of good experiences with that. And so yeah, I was in the church, and here I am now, back in the church.
Awesome. Do you feel like at a young age you had a testimony of the gospel, or do you feel like you kind of were going through the motions, or what was your experience there?
I would say maybe both. We didn't do, and my parents they're great. My dad passed a couple years ago, but my mom's still going strong. Great. We just never did a lot of the like the family night stuff each week, so we didn't do a whole lot of that. But at church, it felt good, and I believed in things. But then as I got older, it was sort of like this or that, church, friends. Oh, I don't know. I believed it, but I don't know if my testimony was necessarily like super strong to where if the temptation or something came up to me, I'd be like, no, go away.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah. So what kind of led to your distancing from the church? What kind of led to leaving the church, or, where you got to there?
I actually went on a mission, 2-year mission, and I loved it. Even when I was out of the church, I never, I always told people it was awesome, great, I loved it. But even before that, in high school, I struggled with a little bit of alcohol, and with some buddies, we like to go do our thing. So it was doing that every weekend type thing. And then I met a gal, and she was a pretty strong member of the church. And so we started dating, and then she found out, because obviously at that time I didn't tell her, and so then I was like, okay, I need to go this way or that way. And so I went the way of the mission, it was great, came home, we got married in the temple. Couple years in though, I started struggling with some things, some personal things. Started not even the alcohol at the time. Got myself in some situations that were I shouldn't have been in. Whether or not, I did this or that, it's neither here nor there. I was just in places I shouldn't have been. And then I got a divorce stemmed from that. And that broke me. Like, it destroyed me. I met with the church. I actually got excommunicated from the church for a while. And so at that time, it just went straight back to my old habits: alcohol, depression, and then throw in police work at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You're dealing with and seeing things that you can't even explain to people. It's so horrific.
Mm-hmm.
And I just really went deep down.
Did you have kids at this time? If so, what was that situation like?
Yeah, my daughter was only 1 at the time. So the divorce myself. You could tell even at a young age, it was sort of confusing at first for her because she was, especially she was getting closer to 2, sort of worked its way out, I guess. But even in the beginning, it's like, here I am. What was I, 25, 26, and I'm back at mom and dad's house in the bedroom with my daughter, like a couple hours a week. And it was horrible. Like I got to the point, and I had just started my law enforcement career. And there were days that I would come home and I would just lock myself in the room, watch a show, and just drink all night long, even in my room. And I would be late for work. I wouldn't even get up for work. I mean, it was a rough beginning of my career.
So police officers aren't perfect, it sounds like.
Far from. We try to do the best we can. At least I do.
So tell me how it felt to be excommunicated. Like, you have this mission. The mission is something you're super proud of. What did that feel like to be excommunicated? Was it, tell me a little bit about that.
Initially, well, I was a little embarrassed because it just happened to be that in the high council where I was, there was someone that I had grown up with. He was like my parents' age, but he'd known me through my youth, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is embarrassing. But I sort of took it. I showed up, I talked to them, I told them what happened and this and that, and they made that decision. And at first I was okay with it. I was like, you know what? It was a good spirit about the meeting. No hard feelings. They're just doing what they feel is best. And so initially I was okay with it. Fast forward a couple years, there was once or twice, like my daughter started getting a little bit older, getting closer to baptism. So I was like, well, maybe I need to try to change some things around. But it seemed like every time I would try to make some steps, paperwork would get lost or something like this would happen. And I was like, you know what? Forget it. You don't want me, I don't want you. So then I started getting pretty bitter and was just like, I always have had that a spirit, and I've always felt something higher power, but I was like, I'll find it my own way. And so I got to that point after a while.
So tell me a little bit more about that. So you're like, okay, I'm going to find my higher power in my own way. What did that look like for you? Were you going to other churches? Were you, experimenting with different religions, or what did that look like?
No, I didn't really go to any other churches, but I had friends that were going to other churches that I would reach out to and talk to them a little bit. Like, I just was like, I'm looking for something, but I don't know what. And some of them would give me a copy of their Bible or whatnot, and occasionally I would read it. But for me, it was mostly like, I'm big into like the Christian shows and movies and stuff, and so even the cheesy ones, and so I would I would watch a lot of those, just sort of get like some kind of a good feeling inside. Usually after I watch one of those is when I'd maybe reach out to someone and be like, so why this or why that. But that was a few years down the line, but that was about the extent of it.
So what was it that kind of led you back to the church? What were there certain experiences? What was it that kind of pushed you back?
So I would say 2013, January 13, I woke up one day and I started dealing really, really bad with some PTSD from work. For the next 2 years, I just kept it in. It was all like, I'm not telling anyone, but holy cow, it was miserable. Like, I would get angry about the smallest things. The drinking just increased. Like, I would come home from work and have alcohol down my throat before I even got into my bedroom. And I was just like, wherever I land that day, I land. And it was just, I was so depressed. I was so just down. It was pretty horrible. And then about 2015-ish, I finally talked to a friend and who was having some similar things, which was a relief because I'm like, I can't be the only one dealing with this or struggling with this, And so we talked a little bit, and then I actually got into a little bit of therapy. And this lady looked at me, and she was really sweet, but she's like, holy cow, you have some issues. We need to fix it. And so I really started working with her a little bit and working just on myself first, physically and things of that nature. And then 2017 came, and I was actually in California for some football games, and I happened to go to a Angels baseball game at the same time, high school football, but was sitting there at an Angels game by myself with a beer in my hand, and I just had this thought come across me that was like, you need to stop now, or else you're not going to be around a whole lot longer. I could just had this thought that I was hurting myself internally with doing all this stuff I was doing to my body. And really about that time, I cold turkeyed it. I went a good year. And then, occasionally I'd maybe have a little sip of something, but it was like rare, maybe at dinner or something to that effect. And then, 2018 came, 2019, and I really started, look, I want to get back into this. I was still talking to friends before that, and it just wasn't feeling the same. And so I started going back.
Friends, like you were talking to friends that were like drinking friends or church friends, or
no, more friends of mine that were other faiths. So I was still looking into like their, why are you there? What makes it feel good to you type thing. But the other friends or coworkers, that was pretty difficult at first to make some of those changes, because you do something for long enough and then you come in one day and just say you're done. You could be a rough crowd sometimes. So, but yeah, I just kept going for it. And then I started talking to some of the leaders, the bishop. I had a great bishop who at first just took me under his wings and loved me as a friend. We were friends. Like he knew, like when I was ready, I would come to him. That's what I did one day. I said, all right, let's do this. And, here we are 3-4 years later, and I'm back. So
so in the beginning, when you were just starting to come back, you're at the baseball game and you have that feeling, and then you just start kind of, taking steps in that direction. Were there any like, what with the bishop, I mean, was it just like you were like, okay, I'm gonna reach out to him, or were there any things that kind of like pushed you in that direction? And another question on top of that was, when you went back to church for the first couple times, how did that feel? Did you feel like you were being judged by people? Did you feel like, what was your experience like with that?
Well, your first question, as far as the bishop, I think him and I being friends really helped, because I was able to just talk to him about anything and everything. It doesn't matter the time of day. So it was one of those, hey, let's talk. Went in and formally talked with each other and just said, hey, this happened. I want to try to move forward. But I mean, it was not like, hey, let's roll and I'm perfect, because, you have your slip ups, especially when you've been doing things for so long. It's hard to cut some of that out. So
when you came back to church, did you feel judged, or did you feel like, what was the congregation like? Did you feel welcomed? Or
I will say initially no. So I had been married a second time, went through another divorce, through a lot of this stuff. The good thing is I have good relationships with them for our kids and stuff like that. So I was on my own, and in the meantime, through all this, I'd gotten a bunch of tattoos as well. So not only am I like by myself, but I've got tattoos all over my arms and everything. And it's frustrating, because even when I wasn't trying to get back in, there's people at the supermarket or whatnot. I mean, I had a lady right in front of me tell her little child that I was a bad person because I had tattoos, and I should have turned around. I didn't, but part of me was like, I risk my life every day for you and your family. You don't know me,
Right.
And so and I'm a pretty easygoing guy. But yeah, I really struggled for a little while, to be honest, sort of by myself, go to church and leave and come home type thing. And it was like that for a bit. So
what do you feel like kept you in the church? Like you're going by yourself, you're feeling, I'm sure just a little uncomfortable going to church and
yeah,
sitting by yourself. What were your experiences like? Like what kept you going during that?
a couple things. One, I feel like I've always been blessed with just my personality. I feel like it's kept me afloat in a few situations. Just able to sort of dig deep, go with it and whatnot. Not afraid to put myself out there. One thing that really hit though, 2 years ago, my dad passed away unexpectedly, right in the middle of sort of this transition. And oh, that was really rough, really, really rough and heartbreaking. And it really, though, for me was like, look, either I believe that I'm going to see him again and I keep doing this and have faith, or I'm upset and mad that this happened and I just go back to where I was before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a huge thing for me the last few years, is just remembering him and my grandparents and stuff. But it's something different when it's your parent, because I have rough days all the time. There's days where I'm like, holy cow. And I just try to remember him and go from there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about you and meeting your wife and how that all went down. And I mean, maybe some of the blessings that you've experienced with coming back to the church.
2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, right after my dad passed away. So I was living up north here in Utah, and my mom was down in Utah County. So I was thinking, okay, I need to find a place closer to my mom. I need to get back down there by her. And so I was starting to look around online and everything. I'm just like, this just doesn't work, and this and that. And I had a friend randomly message me and was like, hey, this basement apartment is for rent in our neighborhood. So I'm like, okay, cool. I looked at it, and the owners of the house upstairs I went to school with,
Mm-hmm.
and I hadn't seen them in 20 years plus. And so I messaged them. I'm like, hey, I want your house. It's in my budget. It's in my location. I don't even want to come look at it. I want your basement apartment. Don't give it to anyone else. And so they saved it for me, whatever. I moved in, and let's see, that was, about this time 2 years ago. A couple months later, and we're in the COVID thing right then. Okay. So no one's going to church. I don't know anyone. And January comes a few months later, and I see this girl right across the street from me. And I didn't know her. I just thought she was the homeowner, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple days later, I see her again, and then she starts going through the back door. And I'm like, I wonder, maybe she's not like the homeowner. Maybe she's living downstairs. So, I did a little more directory search just to take a gander, and found out that she was single. And I was like, oh, cool, and church was just starting to get going a little bit, and I'd occasionally see her and just say hi type thing. And then I reached out to her once and started talking, and I could tell she was very like not into the dating thing. Like she was like big old stop sign, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we occasionally would say hi, and I just pop in every few weeks, like, hey, still here, still the guy across the street with the tattoos. And a few weeks after that, we started talking a little bit more. And then about a month later, finally got her to go on a date with me. And that was about it, really. At first, she was like, I don't want to rush anything. I'm like, hey, I'm good with whatever in this situation. So,
Mm-hmm.
and we just got married in February this year, Provo Center Temple. So
that is so awesome.
yeah, right across the street. And what's cool is she told me when we started getting a little more serious, that she said a prayer once, and she's like, Heavenly Father, I don't want to date. If you want me to remarry, you better put someone right across the street from me.
Oh
And
my
no
gosh.
kidding, right? And I was like,
I literally just got the chills.
It's awesome, huh?
It's so cool. I one of the things that I have found just in my own experience of coming back to the church, my husband has a similar experience of coming back. And I found that when you come back, there's like these little miracles that happen, that God is so obviously in the details. And
Right.
I think that is so cool and so amazing. And it just goes to show that like he's guiding us. And I love that so much.
I agree. One of my favorite talks that I've loved and was part of my coming back was Elder Iron's Mountains to Climb.
Mm-hmm.
And in there he says, even a twig of faith, and so I would tell myself, I'm driving to work, okay, even a twig of faith today, even a twig of faith, like all day long. I'm like, twig of faith. And those little things are awesome.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that talk up. How do you keep your testimony strong today? What are things that you do or keep you, I mean, as time passes, we can get complacent, or what is it that you do to keep your testimony strong? I want to give a shout out for your Instagram account because it is so awesome and I love it. And everybody that's listening to this should follow. What's your handle? So people
it is the.prodigal son.
Love it.
And I'm just, I've done a little bit with it over the last few months, but I'm starting to get into it a little more frequent now. And I don't know, it's cool. I just sort of thoughts I'm having or things that I've read or studied, I like to put on there, and hopefully it touches someone else.
I love that. Yeah. And I'll share it on my Instagram as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. I love it. And to go along with that too, I don't listen to a whole lot of music outside of, I'm big into Christian rock and like just LDS hymns and different things. So I listen to a lot of that stuff. Even if I'm working out, conference talks, church history. I really like that book, The Saints. I've been doing that. So, and then try to study or read what I can at night times. And I try to focus on that stuff. And some days are great. Some days I'm like, wow, you really dropped the ball today, Jace. But those things really tend to help. Even if I'm sort of having an off day, sort of brings my spirit back up.
I love that. Are there any with things, I mean, you mentioned like reading the Saints books. There's a lot of things I think today that are pushing people away from the church, or it's kind of becoming, I don't know, that was part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast, is because I feel like there's a lot of people that are sharing their, opinions about why they're leaving, and they have their experiences. I'm not invalidating their experiences, but I wanted to be able to share stories of people that have came back and the reasons why. And so I think there's a lot of things that people leave over church history or things that they, things like that. So, when it comes to, I mean, if you have questions like that come up, how do you handle those, or what does that look like for you?
We'll say first off that there's just some things that we just don't know fully. We'll never really know fully right here on this earth. I've had those experiences, but for me it was more of an internal thing, because there have been people in the church who have bothered me in the past, and I didn't agree with certain ways or things, but I'm like, okay, look, I'm in it for me, so it's my salvation.
Right.
So if I leave because I'm upset at someone, then for me personally, that's shame on me. But there is a lot of church history out there, and I don't know it all. I'm learning it. And I will tell you this though, I just got back from a church tour back east, went everywhere from Kirtland to the Susquehanna River to the Sacred Grove, and it was one of the most awesome and spiritual things I've ever done in my life. I know there's a lot of questions about this or that, or hey, they used to do this or they used to do that, but to learn about it and see these areas and realize that a young man started something brand new, brought it back, and to do all that is amazing. And of course there's going to be things they're learning and doing, and they were initially having meetings where a lot of the men were smoking and chewing tobacco, and that's where the word of wisdom came in. And these guys were learning as they were going, and they're just humans like we are. But the things that we have from these men and women back then is what a blessing. And yeah, I just, the spirit I felt in certain areas, like the Sacred Grove, was beyond explanation or words or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah. One of the things that you were just talking about was like, you felt like, you had experiences where people kind of rubbed you the wrong way in the church. On the last podcast I did, it was with, Junior Timey, and he was in a gang, and I asked him the same question, like, hey, did you feel judged by anybody? And he's like, I didn't have time for that. I was there for the glory of God. And I just loved that, because my story is I am almost 10 years clean from a heroin addiction. And when I first came back to the church, I would have thought people were, and people probably were judging me, like I probably smelled like cigarettes. I probably looked horrible. But I was so desperate for just, hope and faith and for God's love, basically, that it's like all the other things kind of melted in the background. And there's something really cool about coming back, and no one's like expecting anything from you. Like they're not expecting you to be this perfect Sunday school teacher, or,
Right.
you're just coming back. And so you can really just soak it all up. And if you don't come, no one's going to be like, oh my gosh, where are they? Because you're just starting to come back. And it's this feeling of, you're there for God, and you're there for you and your own testimony. And there's something really amazing about that. So I don't know, like, I love what you had to say about that. Okay.
Yeah, I've looked into some of your story, and I love it. And I love that you're doing this. And I agree. And one thing I'm just full of love, and I feel like I just want to hug all these people when I see them at church. I'm like, yeah, just stay, I love you, and this and that. And if you ever feel like no one cares, I care.
Yeah.
And and it took me a minute, but like in an elders quorum meeting or something, I finally, because you can tell sometimes from comments, people maybe who haven't gone through things maybe quite as severe as places that you and I have been.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I understand your comment, but and I like to give that other perspective, because I feel like it helps a little bit. Like, oh, okay, I didn't even think about that. So I can love here and love here. And so I think that's really important too, is just showing love no matter what situation or experience someone's had.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I think that, a lot of people, when they make mistakes, they can feel like, I can't come back. Like I don't fit into this like picture perfect, mold. But the Savior's atonement is for people like us who made big mistakes. And I think it's one of the most incredible experiences to be so broken, and then to have that change of heart, like Alma the Younger. And I agree. I do the same thing, in Relief Society or whatever. I love to share my story, and I'm sure some people are like, oh my gosh, wow, that was a little intense for Relief Society. But to me, I feel like it's so important to be real and share these experiences of, going from something so dark and horrible to having a life that is so amazing. And it's because I decided to have this little experiment and see if, the Savior's atonement was really for me. And so it sounds like you did the same thing. And I think that's so awesome.
Yeah, I love it. And I still do. And it's in some of my Instagram posts, I always put, the atonement is real. I always tell people the atonement is real.
Yeah.
And, it can take someone like me and like you, and, look at us now, look at the love and blessings.
Yep. So cool. So I wanted to ask, I mean, it's kind of piggybacking off of what we were just talking about, but some of those experiences that you may have had that like you anchor your testimony to, that you just can't deny. I mean, if there's any experiences that you would feel comfortable maybe sharing.
Like I said a little bit ago, a big one now is my dad, just especially with the plan of salvation. Without the atonement, like we were just talking about, I mean, I wouldn't even have that opportunity to see him again, and so that's a big one for me. Is whenever I think of him, I know it's true. Like the atonement's there, it's my bridge, and it's part of the plan to be able to be with him again. That's a big part for me. I've had experiences in the past with other things such as tithing or word of wisdom, things of that nature, and you just can't deny it. It's like, before my dad passed away, when I was sort of hit and miss, I can't even remember what it was, but I was trying to pay my tithing, and that was really hard for me at the time because I hadn't done it for over a decade. And I talked to my dad and I said, well, Dad, I need it was a specific amount. Whatever that tithing was is exactly what I needed. Mm-hmm. And so I decided to pay my tithing. And a couple of days later, I get a phone call from accountant for my taxes. Like, hey, there was a mix up. So we have a check for 400, whatever, that exact amount. I all of a sudden had a random check for, and it still gives me chills. So, I had some of those experiences and I remember those, and there's some that maybe I don't even remember that clearly, but I just know that it's there. And how do you deny that? I just can't. When I'm reading and praying, the feelings, it just feels good. It feels right. And again, I don't know everything, but I know that it's true and I believe it.
Yeah. I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that. What advice would you give to somebody that is maybe struggling, maybe they're drinking, maybe they're just struggling in general and they're thinking about maybe coming back, but what advice would you give somebody, or maybe give your past self?
Though you probably don't think it, you're not that far gone from the church. The atonement's there. It doesn't matter if you've done one small sin or mistake, or you've been off the beaten path for years, and you're never too far gone. Our Heavenly Father and Jesus, they love us, and they're by our sides all the time, and they want us to come back. Say, don't beat yourself up, because that's about the worst thing we could do, because when we beat ourselves up, we just open the door for other negative to come in. So, you know what, buckle up, and it's going to be a bumpy ride, but there's always a way up.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for spending this time and sharing your story. Do you have any imparting words of wisdom for us before we end?
Oh, I just go back. I love these conference talks. There's so much good stuff out there, but I am just, even a twig of faith. Keep that little twig, and even on rough days, just say a little prayer, whatever you need, apologize for whatever it is, or ask for whatever it is that you need, and a twig of faith, and you keep doing that and use the atonement, and you're going to be having some good feelings here pretty soon. Awesome.
I love it so much. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I'm excited for everybody to hear this.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.